right, hi everyone. Hopefully this is all working and we are all ready to go. Make sure that you have a new sketch open up in Code Naturally that's in advanced. And we are going to get started with our lesson in gravity. So the way that we're going to use gravity is we're basically going to start by just making a scene. So we're going to make a background, we're going to do a ground, and then we'll have a small character, and we're going to make that character move with our space bar, and we're going to have it move so that it looks like it's actually jumping. There are ways that you could make it look like it's kind of jumping, but it doesn't exactly have the same look and the same realness to it as this way that we're going to do it today. So whether you've learned how to do gravity before and you're just reviewing, or if you've never learned how to do gravity before and this is your very first time, this is going to be a good starting place for us. So we're going to start out by just setting the scene. We're going to make our character, we're going to make our background, and we're going to do our ground. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to put in rect mode center. And the real reason that I want to put in rect mode center is so that later on when I'm doing we're going to make a mini game out of this at the end. And it's so that later on when we're making our mini game, it's just easier to do distance if we choose to do distance. So we're just going to use rect mode center. So that goes into the curly brackets of function setup, rect, capital MODE, and then parentheses center. So go ahead and make sure that you have that written in. All right. And then the next thing that we want to do is move down to function draw. And make sure you let me know in the comments if I'm going too fast, too slow, if you want me to go over something again, or if you just have another question, you can ask in the comments and either I or Yuval will get back to you. And then also submit your projects. There's a URL in the description that is a way for you to submit your projects. And at the end, it'll ask if you just want to share it or if you are sharing it because you need help. So make sure that you take advantage of that. All right. So now I am in function draw, and I'm going to start by putting in a background. You can use any color you want, it doesn't really matter. If you already have an error popping up, it's probably because you spelled background wrong. That's like the biggest problem that people have been running into lately on the projects that I've been checking, is that there's just a little bit of a spelling error, whether it's you forgot a G in background or you spelled ellipse with one L instead of two. It doesn't really matter. Those are just little errors, and we can work through those together. That's an easy one. All right, so I have my background in. I'm also going to add in a no stroke command, NO capital STROKE, with just empty parentheses. That'll get rid of the outlines on the outside of my shapes. So far, all that we've done is put rect mode center into function setup, and I put in a background. The no stroke, like I said, it'll get rid of the outlines on your shape. You don't have to use that. So feel free to just leave that part out. And also keep in mind that you can always pause this video, you can rewind it, you can ask for help in the comments, so just let me know. All right, so now I'm just gonna choose a color for the ground. And you guys can choose any colors you want. Do not feel like you have to use the same colors as me. All right, so I'm going to just put a fill command underneath there with a greenish color. All right, and then I'm going to make my ground. And what's really important for you to remember right now is that we put rect mode center in. So if I were to put in the normal code for a rectangle for my ground, that wouldn't work. So I need to make sure that I'm going from the center of where I want my rectangle to be, which in this case is 252, 300, or 250, 300. And then here we go. All right, so far we should have rect mode center in. We should have a background in at least. And then you can choose, you don't have to put fills in for a fill in for the rectangle. Let's say you need to catch up, or if I'm going just a little bit too fast, always feel free to leave the fill commands out and you can deal with those later, or leave the stroke commands out and you can deal with those later. That kind of stuff is just like decoration basically, or just like polishing. So feel free to leave that stuff out or just wait for it. All right. Let's see. Okay, and then the last thing that I want to do is actually create. So first I'm actually going to make a variable. We're going to make a few variables for this project, but I'm going to just start with one. So I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to say var space, and this one is going to be for player y. And I want my player's y value to be at, and remember that this is the center y value, it's not the top left hand corner. So I'm going to try like 225. I think that that's going to be good, and a good size for it, or you'll see what I mean. And the reason that we do the player's y value is because we want our player to be able to jump up. If we did the x value, it would be able to jump left or right, but we're looking for a realistic jump in the air, like what you could do. All right, so I'm going to just pause for a second so anyone can catch up if they need to. Like I said, let me know in the comments if I'm going too fast or too slow, or if you need help. And I'm just going to add in some comments to my project. It's always a good idea to add in comments, especially on a project like this where you're learning how to do a new skill or you're reviewing a skill. You can use this as like a baseline for you. So you can go back anytime that you're trying to do a project with gravity and you can say, okay, I remember exactly how to do this because I can go back and read the comments. So all right. So I'm just going to move on to the next step. This is just going to be a quick, easy one. Okay, so this is going to be the color of my character. Like I said, if you need to catch up right now, you can leave the fill command out and you can just do that later on. So, oops, there we go. So I'm going to choose a color for my character. I'm feeling the lighter pastel-y colors. All right. So I'm going to put in a fill. And I'm going to use a rectangle to make my character, but you could choose to do a circle, or you could even choose to do an emoji if you wanted to. I would recommend just sticking with like really basic, simple for right now, and then you can always, I'll zoom in a little bit so that you guys can see better, hopefully you guys can see that better now. So let me know if it's still blurry or if that fixed it, because I can still zoom it in more. You just won't be able to see as much of my text at one time. So let me know. Awesome. Okay. So I am going to create a rectangle now. And for the x coordinate of that rectangle, it really doesn't matter where you put it. I'm going to just put mine at like 350. And then for my y value, I'm going to use player y. All right. and then I'm going to make it 50 units wide and 50 units tall. And then I'm just going to add another number at the end, and that's just going to curve the edges of my character. All right, so we should be awesome. I'm glad that you guys can see it better. I'll make sure that it's this zoomed in every time we do it. So everyone should have rect mode center, a variable for player y that equals 225, or if you did yours a little bit differently, it might be another number, but remember that it's going to be the center of the y. And we have the ground that I put in with a fill to make it green and a rectangle to serve as the ground. And then we have a fill and the character. All right, so we're gonna start moving into the more complicated part of this lesson. So this is where you guys really need to pay attention, and I'll go through everything a couple of times so that we can write it all together. But the first round of me just like writing all of this out, it'd be really awesome if you guys could just all pay attention, make sure you're watching the video, and you don't have to type right now. You can type with me the second time I write it all in. Okay, so we are going to make 3 really important variables. So the first variable that we're going to make is called velocity. And for that, we're going to set it equal to 0. And I'll change these variables around later on to show you how important the values are and what the values impact, basically. So for velocity, it's the speed that something moves in a given direction. So in this case, it's going to control how fast our character moves down. So hopefully that makes sense. Another thing that will impact how it moves down is gravity, right? So gravity is the invisible force that holds everything down to Earth. So we're going to put gravity into our game, and just by giving it the name gravity, it doesn't make it work, but we're going to put in some math statements. They're easy math statements, don't worry, that will make it so that it acts like real gravity. And for that one, we want to have it equal 1. All right, the last thing that we're going to put in is a variable called lift. And what lift is going to do is allow us to work against gravity. So it's basically saying how far we want our character to be able to jump against the gravity that's holding it down. So if you were to stand up and jump, however high you got would be your lift. So hopefully that makes sense. And we're gonna make that -20, and the reason it's a negative number is because we want our character to jump up, and as we go up, our numbers get smaller, right? So we want it to become a smaller number. If you wanted it to fall, then the lift would be positive. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so now let's go through these, and I want you guys to write these out now. So the first one, and you can totally use shorter names for these. You could use like V instead of velocity, but it's really important that you can use this as a resource later on when you're doing other projects where you have to jump. So it is nice if you just use the whole name for it, or you can just use a bunch of really good comments. All right. So these are going to be the values we're going to start out with. Like I said, I'll change them later on and show you how they can impact our character's movement. But if all of you would just start with this much, or these values, then we should be good. So I won't actually erase these because I want you guys to be able to write them at your own speed, but I'll just highlight them. So we have our variable for velocity, which equals 0, variable for gravity, which equals 1, and variable for lift, which equals -20. Make sure that you put -20. And then as far as spelling goes, just keep in mind that when you write your variables later on, you need to make sure the spelling is always the same. So just take a little bit of time to make sure you're spelling all of these words correctly. Is what I should be saying. All right. So let me know in the comments when you guys are ready to move on to the next step. I'm just gonna look at my notes and see what's coming next, and then we're doing pretty good. I think that we're gonna have a good amount of time at the end to go over how to make a mini game and then how to modify that mini game to make it into something different and cool and fun to play. All right. Seems like you guys are just about ready to go. If you aren't ready to go yet, keep in mind you can always pause it and rewind, and I'll keep trying to pad it with a little bit of extra conversation so that you guys have time to catch up. But yeah, just let me know if you guys are ready to go or anything like that. All right, so at this point, I'm gonna have to scroll down a little bit. I'm hoping that you can still see the variables. Okay, that should be good. I think you can still see the variables and you can see the new lines of text that I'm going to write in. Okay, so okay, we are good. So I'm going to put a comment here, and I'm going to skip a comment for right now. So we are going to put in 2 lines of math, basically, that will make it so that our character can move up later on. It's not going to automatically do too much to it, but it will do one thing that you'll notice that we will fix right after, so don't worry about it. So first thing that we're going to say is velocity equals velocity plus gravity. Okay, so that means that the velocity that we're acting on our character will be affected by gravity. So basically the speed that it moves down is being affected by the gravity. Hopefully that makes sense. The next line that we're going to put in is player Y equals player Y plus the velocity. So now we have our player Y, our velocity, and our gravity all related to each other because velocity equals velocity plus gravity, and the player's Y value is going to equal the player's Y plus velocity. And because velocity is positive, it's going to move it down. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Things that you can do right now is you can make comments that make sense to you about how we're thinking about this. So what you can do is you can say, okay, so velocity equals velocity plus gravity. So that is what allows gravity to interact with our velocity. And then player Y equals player Y plus velocity. So this is what moves our character down. And so what you'll notice is that the player is now just falling and disappearing, right? That's because the gravity is acting on it and there's nothing to hold it down. It's kind of like if you were skydiving, it's that space in between where you would hit Earth, where you would stop falling. So right now we haven't given it any earth or any like ground to fall to. So that's why it's just kind of falling into nowhere. All right, so as we have our character now who's just kind of, yes, so your character should be falling into the abyss and just disappearing. You'll see that's what mine is doing as well. And we're going to fix that right now. So we need to basically tell our character, hold on, we want you to actually act like that rectangle that we made at the bottom is ground. So to turn that into ground, we're basically just going to make a boundary, which we've made a few other times. So what we're going to say, we're going to move down, and we're going to say, all right, I'm going to make a comment, add a boundary. We're going to make a conditional statement that says, all right, if, and then in parentheses, our player's y ends up being greater than 225, which is the starting point. So that's where my player y is starting. You'll see in my, I guess you can't really see it, in my variable. So if it's greater than 225, then, which is inside of the curly brackets, we want our player y to equal 225. And you'll see now it's not moving anymore. So that just stopped it from that falling action that we didn't want. So now anytime that our character would be higher than this, it would fall down, but it would stop at where we created this ground, this boundary for it. All right. And I really, really recommend that you add in, what are they called? Add in comments on this project so that you can use this as a resource later on. All right, so make sure that your character has stopped and is actually being held by the ground. If it's not, let me know in the comments and I can try to help you out. If it is working, also please let me know. I'm gonna just take a quick pause here because I just went over a lot. So I'm gonna let you guys ask questions if you need to. What was I gonna say? Oh, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. If you haven't already, thank you to those of you who already have. It's really, really helpful for us. If you are liking and subscribing, it's really helpful and we really appreciate it. So if your character is still falling, check that your inequality sign is the right way. So you want to make sure, remember it's like a crocodile, and you want the mouth of the crocodile to be eating whatever is bigger. So we said if player y is greater than, perfect. Okay, so if player y is greater than 225, we just want it to equal 225. All right, so now we are going to get into the exciting stuff. This is what's actually going to make our character jump, which is what we want. I'm using the spacebar for this because that's a really common key that's used in video games to make a character jump. So I'm just sticking with that. You can choose to use any key you want. It's really up to you. So we are going to make a if key is down statement right underneath where we did our boundary, and making a comment, and I'm going to say jump. All right. So I'm going to say if, and then in a set of parentheses, key, capital I is capital D down. I'm going to make another set of parentheses and say 32 because that is the key code for the space bar. And then I'm going to make my curly brackets, and we're actually going to nest a couple of these conditional statements together, and you'll see why in just a minute. And I'll take it out for you so that you can see what the difference is. So the second thing I'm going to say is if, and then in parentheses, player y equals 225. And that's just wherever your player's y value is. So mine's at 225, yours might be somewhere else. All right, so I'm gonna say inside of these nested conditional statements, I'm going to say that I want the velocity to equal the lift. So let's look back and think about what that means. So if the velocity equals the lift, that means that lift is getting added in to the gravity. So that would basically mean that we're subtracting 20 from the gravity. So let's see if that works. So make sure you click back on your screen and you press the space bar, and we have a jump. So just going over what I just did, we have two nested conditional statements. So we want to make sure we have two opening curly brackets and two closing curly brackets. If you already have an error statement, that's probably why, because you're missing one of your curly brackets. So we have if, and then key is down, capital I, capital D, another set of parentheses. I chose the number 32 because that's the space. If you don't already, you can turn on your key picker over here, and you can use it to test out any key to see what number it corresponds to. All right, and then we have our first curly bracket, and then we go down and say if, in parentheses, player Y equals 225, then we want velocity to equal lift. So we basically, by taking velocity and making it equal lift, we are taking this statement right here that says velocity equals velocity plus gravity, and we're making it so that it's lift equals lift plus gravity, basically. So we're changing it so that instead of velocity gaining momentum and moving down, it's losing it and then it comes back down. Because gravity is always acting on it, but when we press that space bar, momentarily, it's lifted and then it's brought back down. So the reason that we put in if player Y equals 225, if I were to comment that out, you would see that I could hit the space bar 1,000 times and my character would just keep getting higher and higher and higher. And that's not what we want. We just want our character to jump once. So this way, when I press, or if I got rid of the player Y, or if I brought it back in, sorry, then it would make it so even if I press the space bar a bunch of times in a row, it would just jump once. So let's go back and go over everything that I did one more time so that we can check all of our code. So if parentheses key capital I is capital D down, and then a set of parentheses that says 32, and 32 is the space bar. Like I said, you can change it so it's a different key, it doesn't really matter. And then we said if player Y equals 225, which I chose that because that's what my player Y value equals. So if your player Y equals something else up here, then that's what you have to put down here. So one really common error that I've noticed with this project is that people are they have their mouse pressed over here and then they're pressing the space bar and it's not moving because it's actually just creating spaces over here. So make sure you click on the canvas and then press the space bar. And that goes for any movement that you're doing. Anytime you're using arrow keys or letters, you want to make sure that you're clicking on the canvas first and then pressing the key. All right. So if it's not working, you can also make sure that you have all your spelling correct. Like I said, if you spell velocity one way down here and another way up here, sometimes it won't actually give you an error message, it just won't work. Make sure that you have 3 equal signs right here. And make sure that you have the key code as 32 or whatever it is that you chose. But for now, I think 32 is the easiest. If you are all caught up and you're just waiting for the next step, you can try playing around with your variables, or you can go in and change and add in comments. So if let's say you don't want your character to jump so high, you could change lift to be a smaller, or a bigger number, sorry. So now if I made it like -10 instead of -20, that's how high it jumps. So you could also make it 15. So we're just gonna stick with this project for today. We're not gonna do any like projectiles or anything like that. I see some comments about that. It's definitely possible if you've been part of our master class. There's a few easy ways to do it. There's also easier ways. Maybe we can do that next week. Let me know if that's a project that you'd be interested in next week. But for today, we're just going to turn this into a really simple mini game where we're just like jumping over obstacles, basically. So as I was saying right before I got distracted, you could change this lift to be a smaller or a bigger number to change the way that your character jumps. So if you wanted to jump higher, you would make it a smaller number because it's a bigger negative number. And if you want it to jump less, you make it a bigger number like that. Okay, so I think I'm gonna leave mine at -20. But like I said, feel free to change yours. And I'm just gonna see if anyone has shared any projects for me to look at. Not yet. Okay, so that's what happens if we change our lift. Try playing around and see try playing around with the gravity and velocity to see how it changes. But we also can move on to the next step now. And just keep in mind that the reason that velocity is a negative number is so that it subtracts from where our character is. So we want our character to move up. As we go up the y-axis, the numbers get smaller. So that's why we want to subtract. If we were to have a positive number, it would probably go down, but it also would just not work as well. You'll see why. All right, so yeah, if you make it too big of or too small of a negative number, basically, it'll jump really, really high, and then it'll take a long time for the gravity to bring it back down to Earth, basically. It's kind of like the difference between if you were to just stand and jump versus if you were to jump out of an airplane. It's going to take you a lot longer to come back down to Earth if you jump out of an airplane versus if you jump on the ground or jump on a trampoline or something like that. All right, so 2 choices for right now. I really like to use these types of projects as resources. So I would recommend leaving this the same and just copying all the code that you made and making a new sketch. So for example, I'm gonna make this one called Gravity Minigame. You can also just choose to leave it on the one that we've been working on, but I wouldn't recommend it. So just by copying and pasting it, it makes it so that you have one as a reference that's just called Gravity, and then you have another one that you can come back to that's a game that you can play. All right. So for the mini game, I'm going to show you one way to do it. And then I'm going to give you guys kind of a challenge at the end so that you can work on it on your own time. Our classes are a little bit shorter now. This one's just an hour instead of an hour and a half for the purpose of you guys working individually on projects. You can always still get help the same way that you've gotten help before by coming back to this video and writing in the comments, or you can reach out to us on codenaturally.com. Or you can submit your project through the link that is in the description. Okay, so now to make the mini game, I am going to start by just designing a little enemy. And I want my enemy to move along the x-axis. So I'm going to make my var enemy x because I do not want its y value to change. I just want it to move along this way. So I'm writing enemy because it's shorter, but it's basically just going to be an obstacle for this. So what we can do is, let's see, let's make a rectangle. So down here I'm going to write enemy, and let's do a fill for it. I'm going to do like a dark blue color. And then I'm just going to make an enemy that is a rectangle. And the x value is enemy x. And then for the y, I'm going to make it 225. And I'm going to make it 25 wide and 25 tall. Oh, and that's too high. Oh, because it's the center. All right, so I just made my enemy a rectangle. I put the x value at enemy x, the y value at 240, and then I just made it 25 by 25, 25 wide and 25 tall. And then so basically all I've done so far, I made a variable for enemy x that I just set equal to 50. And then I moved down and I put in a fill command and made a rectangle that was at enemy x, comma, 240, and then I made it 25 wide and 25 tall. So that is all I've done so far. And I will wait for just a minute. Let me know when you guys are ready to go and I will keep going. All right, so all I'm gonna do next is say enemy x equals enemy x plus, let's just do 2 for now. And so basically what I'm going to do is just make it so that my character will come back from where it is. So to do that, I am going to say if enemy x is greater than 500, then I want enemy x to equal -50. And the reason why I did -50 is because it starts at 50. So if I make it -50, then it'll start at 0. Is that right? Or -50 is just off the screen, so that it looks like it's constantly moving. Yeah. So here's what I've done. I created a fill command for my enemy. I made a rectangle that had the x value of enemy x. I made it so that enemy x equaled enemy x plus 2. and I said if my enemy's x is greater than 500, then I want it to equal -50. And that's it so far. So catch up, take your time, let me know when you are ready to go. And I think you can see where this mini game is going. So basically we want it to be so that our character is jumping over the enemy or obstacle basically that is coming its way. You can see that it's a little bit hard, if not impossible, to do with a speed of 2, so I'm going to actually speed it up a little bit so it's 4 so that it's easier to jump over. One variation of this game that would be really fun and really interesting is if you had a new enemy speed every time that it came onto the screen. So I can show you guys how to do that. Other things that you can consider putting in are a score maybe, so every time you jump over the obstacle you gain a point, or maybe you could put a life system in, so if the distance between the enemy and the character is too small, so you basically like get hit by the enemy, then you so if that happens then you lose a life, something like that. You could put a timer in, so maybe you only have 30 seconds to do it before it speeds up, or you, another one, or you just have like 20 seconds to jump over as many as you can. Another really popular one that people do is they jump over. What am I trying to say? They make it so the more that you jump over, the more appear on your screen. So for example, right now I have one enemy. I've seen a lot of people do it so that, you know, after you last for 30 seconds or after you have 10 points, then another enemy will appear on the screen that you also have to jump over. So that's one way that you could do it. For now, we are just going to focus on making it so that our character and our enemy, the distance between them affects whether you are alive or not, basically. So we'll do that together, and then I think that I'll show you guys how to make a random speed appear because it's pretty easy, but there's one step of it that's really easy to forget. So I'm going to just wait for you guys to tell me that you are ready to move on, and then we can do that together. Make sure if you are all caught up and you are ready to go, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm going to just do a couple of modifications to this with you guys. If you're not interested in that and you want to just be done with this project, you can totally be done with this project. If you want to work on it on your own, that's totally fine. Share your projects with us though. We're really excited that you guys have learned this today. It's kind of a hard skill to master, but everyone did a really great job with it, so that's awesome. We're still going to have class for about 15 minutes. So in those 15 minutes, I'll show you guys how to finish this off. So what I'm going to do is make a variable for enemy speed. So first I'm going to show you guys how to make a random enemy speed. So we're basically going to say var, and I'm just going to make an enemy speed, and I'm going to have it equal random, and then in parentheses 3, 10. So that'll basically be the range. So 3 will be the lowest and 10 will be the highest speed. So I'm going to scroll down now and say, okay, so right here I have enemy x equals enemy x plus 4, but what I want to do is have it plus enemy speed. So now it's just one random speed always. So every time that I clear the canvas and start over, it's going to be a different speed. The way that I envision this happening is more that every time it leaves the screen and then comes back, it's a different speed. So the way that we can do that is we can just scroll back up and say, all right, we made it so var enemy speed equals random 3, 10. And what we can do is just copy that whole line, and we're just gonna leave out the variable, the var, and we're gonna move down and say, okay, if our enemy x is greater than 500, then we want our enemy x to come back, basically. But I also want the speed to be a new random number between 3 and 10. So then all you have to write right below it, still inside of those curly brackets, is enemy speed equals a random number between 3 and 10. So now you'll see that every time my character or my enemy leaves the screen and then comes back, it's a different speed. So this will make this a harder game to play because you basically will have to figure out, okay, it's going really fast this time. Is it going to go really slow the next time or really fast again? And you could make this a bigger range too. So you could easily make it so that instead of like 3, 10, it's 1, which is super, super hard, but you could do it, 1, 50 or something like that. That will be a super big variance in the speed and will make this game super, super hard. So I like to keep it in the like 3 to, I would say probably like 15 is the highest you want to go. We can try it with 20 and you can see how fast it goes, or it's capable of going. So it's not going that fast yet. But if I were to change this to like a random number between like 15 and 20, you would see that it would just go super, super fast, and that would make this a really hard game to play. So yeah, I would have already lost. So instead of doing that, I'm gonna keep mine at 3, 10, but you can choose to make yours 3 to 20 or 3 to 15 or 1 to 50, whatever it is that you want to do. All right, so the last thing that we need to do is make the distance. So that's basically what's going to make this a losable game. So if, and then in parentheses, dist, D-I-S-T, between our characters. So if I scroll up, I can say, okay, my character was made at 350, player Y. So I'm going to move down. So I'm going to say the distance between 350, player Y, and the distance between my enemy, which I can see right above on line 39, was made at enemy x, 240. And I'm going to say if it's less than, let's try 20. Then what I want to happen is we can make our enemy speed equal 0 maybe. One thing that I would recommend for this, so you can see it just stopped, which means that it's working, the distance is working. One thing that I would recommend for this is creating game screens. If you haven't already made game screens before, there's a whole YouTube video on it. You can go, I think there is actually. If not, you can look back at some of our old videos and they're in there, especially for Pong, there's game screens in there. We've gone over them 2 or 3 times in the live advanced classes, but if you haven't been to every class, you might have missed it, which is totally fine. So I would recommend putting in a game screen instead of making the enemy speed equal 0 and just having it be like you lost and then have a button to play again. If you wanted this to look like a more advanced mini game, you could have a home screen, you could have your play screen, which would be this, and then you could have a like you lost screen or you won screen or something like that. Another fun thing that you can do is you can make a ton of different mini games like this and make your own little arcade, where basically you can make it so that there's 6 different boxes and you can click here to play this game or click here to play that game, something like that. I've made a game that's kind of similar to that before, but it's kind of like a choose your adventure game. So there's like 4 different worlds that you can choose from. So that's a fun idea for how you could use these mini games. I don't think 20 is exactly the right number, but play around with that number, play around with 20, 25, 30. It really depends on how big you made your characters. So I chose to make mine certain sizes, but you might have made yours different sizes. So it really depends on what size you made your characters, as well as the speed can affect it too. So play around with different numbers until you get some that work, because you'll see there might be instances where it will run into it and not stop, but that one was pretty good. Okay, let me know if there's any more or any other requests that you have for me to add into it right now, and then also let us know if there's any special requests for class next week, or I'm going to go over how to share your projects one more time. I'm going to just check again to see if anyone has shared a project today. Okay, so when you're sharing a project, all that you have to do is go to the link that's in the description, and it'll ask you just like basic information like what's your name and are you part of a current class, and that's just so that we can contact you and say, oh hey, I know that you asked a question earlier in the week, let me help you, or so that we can, sometimes we include our student projects in our newsletters that we send out to your parents every week, so we can put your student work in there and give you credit for it. So make sure you put your name, and then also to share the project, you're going to want to hit the exit button, and then you just click on these three little dots. My screen's really zoomed in, so it does not look very good, but I'm going to zoom out. There we go. So you would just click on these three little dots, click share, and then generate this link. And this link is what's going to enable you to share your project. So if I copy and paste that, it just opens up my game. And this is the way that it looks, so that if something gets modified over here, it doesn't actually affect your code. And if you just share like this URL with us from your actual project, we won't be able to go in and see your project. So that would be a problem, because we want to be able to share your project or to help you with it. So yeah, let me know if there's anything else that you guys want me to add in to this project or anything like that, but I think we are just about done for the day. So also let me know if you have any requests for next week. I know that Noah had said he wants to make it so that it can shoot fireballs, which is something that we can do in a kind of, it's a little bit harder of a class, but we could totally do it. So let me know if there's any other projects that you're really excited about that you think would be really fun. Let me know if you liked this project. I'm trying to think of what else. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Yeah, I think we are just about good to go. You guys were really awesome today. Really good job. This is a super hard concept to teach and to learn, and you guys did a really awesome job and made it really easy. So nice work. All right, well, everyone stay safe, have fun, watch our YouTube videos, subscribe to our channel. Let me know if you have any special requests. Share your projects with us. That would be awesome. And have a good rest of your day.